Okay, so this is part three of our 487 final project, and this is Thomas Hu. So, there were a couple of pretty big challenges that we faced regarding our project. The first one, which Bill kind of mentioned earlier, was our rate limits, right? So, the Twitter API only allowed us to have a certain number of requests within 10 minutes, and we easily blew past that. Because if you will look at the number of tweets regarding, let's say, the word pip, right, there is 7,000 tweets, which is a lot. And considering the fact that you can make queries pretty fast, like I'm sure you can imagine that it was very easy to blow past that. So in order to mitigate this, we had two things. One, what we did was we added throttling, which is when you use some type of blocking operation to slow down the request, right? So that was something that will help us get past the rate limit. And two was that we just add an error code, told them to like come back later if we somehow exceeded our requests for this time period. That was a big one. The second one was how should we, process our data and then send it back? Because initially we had our data stored in text files, like locally, and the front end just opened up those text files and imported and loaded the JSON in order to render data. Now that was like our quick and dirty method, right? But of course, we had to turn our thing into an actual API, and turning it into an API for it to work when it's actually hosted was somewhat of a challenge because we had to make sure that our queries worked with our like we had to do integration testing between our front end and our back end, and their like resulting fetch libraries, which of course was a lot more complicated than what we initially had. Now, finally, something that we ran into was that when you have a lot of data points, loading the graph, as you can see right now, it takes a little bit of time. So if you give it a second, right? But as you can imagine, like just storing this amount of data, storing 7,000 data points inside our graph, it just takes a lot of rendering resources. So we had to find a lot of ways to speed this up. Like either with caching the graph or with like pre-rendering it so that when they load it, they wouldn't have to wait, right? So that it would be loaded like when the site is loaded and not when you clicked. Like overall, we just had to do a lot of different things in order to get our project to run at an acceptable speed when you're dealing with massive amounts of data. And I mean overall, like it was a challenge, but we managed to solve it. Like we did the back end, made the front end work with the back end together. So overall, I think we done overall, I think we did pretty good. Like despite the technical challenges of working with like thousands and thousands of lines of data.